Good morning and welcome to all of you to our Sherwood Park United Church online worship this Sunday, April the 26th. It's so wonderful that you've chosen to spend your morning or afternoon or whenever it is that you're watching this with us in worship. Since we can't be together in our sanctuary for goodness knows how long at this point, it is so great that we are able to stay connected in this way to one another. Today would have been our anniversary service of becoming an Affirming congregation 2 years ago. And since we can't be together in person, it's of course going to look a little bit different than it would have. However, we are still going to celebrate our decision to become a safe space for our LGBTQ2+ friends. Here is what our service will look like this morning. We are starting off with an interview with the lovely and wonderful and wise Hasina Juma. Many of you will remember Hasina from when she interviewed me back in 2018. And this time I had the pleasure and the joy of getting to interview her and pick her brain and see what she has to say to us at Sherwood Park United Church as we continue to navigate what it means to be an ally and an advocate for the LGBTQ2+ community in 2020. Hasina's story focuses on how she boldly embraced her sexuality, navigating conflicts in identity, where she's starting to be embraced in Canadian society, although perceived as committing a sin in her faith tradition of her upbringing, while gaining credibility in the South Asian community and the LGBTQ2+ community. Hasina's story is one of resilience and a determination to do whatever it takes to be herself in a world which taught her to conform in order to belong. At a time when the LGBTQ2+ community is not even acknowledged in her former religion and ethnic community, she speaks up through her groundbreaking digital platform, where she uses her lived experiences to move the LGBTQ2+ people of color from being ashamed of who they are to being empowered by their sexual orientation, while also creating a deeper understanding of the experiences and complexities faced by the LGBTQ2+ people of color to heterosexual folks. Hasina's advocacy work has not only led to various speaking engagements, but also features in newspapers, magazines, and podcasts with a global reach. And so we are very, very blessed to have her sharing with us this morning. After that, we'll listen to our anthem, chosen for you by our lovely choir director. After that will be the pastoral prayer, and we will finish this week with our scripture reading today, again read by Richard. So thank you, Richard, for that. And of course, this week, we received the sad news of the passing of Henry Unrau, a beloved charter member of our congregation. Henry will be dearly missed, and we lift in prayer and hold in our hearts Lois and Keith and David at this very difficult time. We will, of course, be waiting until a time in the future when we are able to be together in a large group to have a memorial service and a celebration of Henry's life. But in the meantime, we will continue to hold his family tenderly in our hearts. Friends, with that being said, let us take a moment to take a breath and prepare ourselves for this coming time of worship. The first part of the interview with Hasina will be Hasina sharing some of her life experiences of what it was like for her to struggle with her identity, as well as her identity as an Ismaili Muslim and what that meant for her. Later in the interview, she will share with us words of wisdom that will guide us as we continue to be an affirming congregation. Friends, thank you for joining me. The children's time is already posted in another video, so kids, please feel free to check that one out. And friends, grace and peace to you and blessings on your time of worship.
I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
I can't remember how long ago it was that we actually had our interview, where you interviewed me after we became an affirming congregation.
I want to say it's like 2018. So it's
Yeah,
been a while.
like a year and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, probably that sounds about right.
Well, the time has come and the roles are reversed, and now I get to interview you, and I'm so excited about it. And we've been waiting for this all week at Sherwood
Mhm.
Park United, so thank you for being here. Let's start off with the first question. So tell us about yourself and how you came to be an activist for the LGBTQ2 plus people of color.
So I'm a Sherwood Parker, lifelong Sherwood Parker, and I've seen it grow and evolve significantly over the last 38 years. While I was growing up in the 80s, Sherwood Park was a place where there weren't a lot of people of color. So for the first 12 years of my life, up until grade 12, a large focus of me was how do I blend my Canadian identity with my religious identity, being a Somali Muslim, and having family roots from Tanzania and India. What does that look like on an everyday basis? And it was challenging at some points going to elementary school and being the only Muslim student, maybe with two other people of color, to then going to Salisbury and graduating in 2000 with maybe 8 or 9 high school students out of hundreds and hundreds of students. So there's a lot of struggles in terms of how do you identify your values? How do you share your religious practices? How do you communicate that? Can you have religious friends and school friends? What does that practically look like? So after graduating grade 12, it was finally a space where I felt like I belonged and I didn't have to choose between my identities. And when I went to university across the country in my 4th year, I came to a realization that I was bisexual. And that was terrifying, but also exciting to say that, okay, at the age of 24, I finally have a label that fits to me, that makes sense to me, something that I feel home. But
Mm.
at the same time, I felt that same feeling of being different again, because when I looked around in my surroundings, and at that point in my life, I was really involved in the Somali community and doing the religious practices. I didn't see anyone who identified as Canadian, as an Somali Muslim, and was part of the LGBTQ2 plus community. So there was a lot of shame there. There was a lot of guilt for being different than the norm. And I felt like I would lose everything. I would lose myself. I would lose my family. I would lose my friends. I would lose the communities that I've grown up in, that have not only been my sense of where I pray with people, but where I do social activities and family dinners and sporting activities and all of these other range of activities that go outside of just attending a prayer center. And because of all of that lack of visibility and the interpretations that I was given that homosexuality is a sin, I hid in the closet for 10 years.
Mm.
And every day I filtered what I said, especially when it came to like answering dating questions, or people ask normal questions, how are you doing? And I couldn't answer those questions truthfully because I felt like there would be a consequence. To then fast forwarding and into 2016 to saying, okay, I'm ready to come out and I'm ready to share this news at the age of 34. I'm going to share it with my immediate family, to then going on to seeing what does that mean in my world. As I discover more of myself, I felt different than others in my religious community. I felt different than those in the LGBTQ community. I felt different than people in society. So the last 3 years have been a journey to figure out, who am I? If I strip all of the beliefs away and what I've been told and how I've told to be and what achievements you need to do in life to be successful, who am I? And I'm finally at a place where I can team. It was the first time where I felt like I was living my life to the fullest, where I was the happiest. Um, and because of my experience of not seeing anyone who is a Canadian born person of color in society, or my religious community, or my ethnic community, I wanted to give back to the community and to say, I don't want anyone else to go through the struggles that I went through of spending 30% of their life partly in the closet and partly healing from trauma. And so I became an activist to say, let me be that role model. So when you think of someone who is LGBTQ and person of color and thriving, I want people to be associated that, look at me, I'm no different than anyone else. I also didn't find a lot of resources that were catered to people who have multiple identities.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some struggles that all LGBTQ folks will have. And there's some struggles that are very unique when it comes to people with multiple identities, because there's clashes in values, right? So for me, it was in Canadian society by 2005, when same-sex marriage became legal, we were told that, yeah, marriage is now between two people who love each other, right? And it's shifted from a man and a woman. But the belief systems in the Ismaili Muslim community have not changed. So on one hand, I'm being told, be who you are, love who you want to be, you have the same rights as everyone else. But I'm also, the religious community was a big part of my life for 34 years. And to have a different message there, and then to look at the people who are African and Indian to say, well, there's no real representation there either. The first Canadian-born person who has roots in South Asia who came out was Lilly Singh, and that was in 2019. And so you may know her as the YouTuber who identifies as I, Superwoman, and has her own late night TV show. But she came out in 2019. Bollywood movies are only talking about it in the last year because because homosexuality got decriminalized in India in 2018. So when you have a Bollywood industry that's global, that's when the stories are coming out, and stories are very powerful in terms of shedding misconceptions and shifting paradigms when it comes to love and religion and homosexuality and what that looks like. So I really give back to make the journey easier for others and to say, there's nothing wrong in being who you are. Like, embrace it. And there's so many positives to that can bring to you and to your family and to your community and to the society that you live in.
Well, I mean, thank you for sharing that. And I can certainly hear how there's that struggle with where on one hand, you know, you're in Canada and 2005 hits and you are invited and welcome to marry whoever you want as far as Canadian society goes. But then on the other hand, you're a part of this religious community that isn't just your religious community. It's your culture. It's the people who you interact with. It's your family. And so I can appreciate that when you have this sense of self that doesn't really fit completely in either world, and there's nobody who looks like you, who's in the same position that you can look to as a role model, I can absolutely see how that would inspire you to want to be that for somebody.
And it's a downward spiral. Like, if I look at 2015, like, I was in such a bad state emotionally. Like, I felt hopeless. I felt like the world was against me. I felt like signs of depression. And yeah, I was functioning. I was going to work and I was like doing the normal things that people do to have a normal life, but I was shattered inside. And it was at that crossroads where I had to make a decision to say, I either continue down this path of not being myself and playing a double personality and spending so much emotional energy on that, or I do something different. And I embrace who I am, and I look at that side of me that I don't want to look at because I've been programmed to say that no, love is between a man and a woman, and I look at it and I internalize it and I work through it and I get help from others. But I was lucky that I had resources to do that with the help of professionals, because it's that crossroads where people get into addictions and they get into drugs and they do self-harm and they do all of these things because you're in such a dark world and you don't know anyone who's like you. And when you feel like that, you feel isolated. So that's where you get into deeper issues. So I'm thankful that I chose myself and I chose the route of, I'm going to get help from others in a community where we don't ask for help. It's not something that's seen as positive, and to say, no, I'm going to do things on my terms and to sort of make sure that I get through the other side, because the biggest gift I can give myself is loving myself and embracing all parts, right? The good things and the flaws and the parts that I don't want to look at, right?
Yeah. So then, like, that's a perfect segue for my next question of, can you share some of your experience of what it's been like to fully and truly embrace your identity as a bisexual woman of color? And what then would you say would be your biggest blessings of doing that, as well as some of the challenges that we've already touched on?
So I think the biggest blessing is the freedom that I felt. So if you're someone who's heterosexual, freedom is something that you may not be aware of, because it's innate in you. You always feel it. You don't have to think about things. You don't have to figure out, am I safe in this space? Do I need to come out in this space? Do I need to watch what I say? So the first thing I felt is freedom. Freedom to say, I finally have a label that makes sense to me, where I feel home. I can finally be myself. I don't have to filter what I say. I'm actually proud of who I am, of my sexual orientation, and I'm not ashamed of it. I see it something that empowers me, instead of when I was hiding in the closet, it was, oh, I'm ashamed of this. No one's going to like me. No one's going to be friends with me. I'm going to be that person who's going to be alone in the house with no one around because no one loves me. So that was a big shift. And the second shift is being myself and not having to filter conversations. When I was in the closet in university, very common to talk about like who you're dating, who do you like. It's a very social setting in a university. And every time I got asked those questions, I always answered from the perspective of, okay, I know I like men and women. I'm just going to focus on the men that I like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to focus on the male celebrities, rather than saying, no, I actually like both. And every time I filtered what I said, it was like a part of me died. And you do that for 10 years and you feel like 3/4 of your body is numb. So to be able to be myself and to say, okay, I'm going to be me, and it's going to be rocky, and there's going to be situations that I still feel uncomfortable being myself in, but at least there's more tools in the toolbox than what I had originally. In terms of the challenges, I would say there's probably a couple. I would say the first thing is, coming out is not a one shot thing. It's a lifelong journey. So as you progress on your journey, you're going to have different difficulties that are going to require different tools and are going to require you to figure out, where do you stand? And they're going to test your faith in yourself and your ability to stand up for what you believe in and not what people have told you. So if I look at my journey, some of the challenges were being in the closet, coming to that point at 10 years, saying, no, I need to make a different choice. I need to get help. I need to figure out how I accept myself. I need to figure out, how do I share this with everyone else? The second part of that was, okay, now that I've accepted myself, how do I share it with my immediate family? The next part was, how do I share it with my extended family? How do you share it? How many people do you share it with? Do you share it by email? Do you tell people? And you go through this conversation of, well, family does matter to me. I do want to have authentic conversations. And when people ask me, how are you? I want to be able to answer that, to say, hey, I'm not doing well today, or no, today I'm fantastic. And I actually met someone who I'm dating. I want to have those honest relationships. So that requires you to say, hey, I'm not straight. And if I fast forward after that, the challenges have been, which communities do I fit into? The more I learned about myself and what I believed in and what I felt to be true, there were some spaces where I had a big disconnect. And one of those spaces where there was a disconnect was with my religious community. And no one tells you how to leave a religious community. There's not a how-to guide that says, follow the 10 steps and we will take you to the other side, right? Like, there's nothing like that. And the challenges I face now are more around, I'm engaged to my fiance, and I'm the first person in my family who's doing a same-sex marriage. And there's different views at the table. There's some people that are absolutely ecstatic for my partner and I, and there's other people that are neutral, and they don't know what that means because they haven't seen it represented in their world. There's others that are in our world who say, yeah, we love you and support you, but you can feel that there's a disconnect between what they're saying and what they're actually doing. So each of those circumstances, there's different tools, and one situation doesn't compare to another situation, but it's the core thing is believing that who you are matters. And I'm just like everyone else, and I also get to celebrate the milestones that everyone else gets to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to hold myself back and say, oh, because I'm a bisexual, I can't do that. So it's the belief systems and the thinking that is really challenging at some point.
Yeah, I bet. And so, because so many in your family, like in your extended family, are part of this culture, this religion, where it's seen as sinful or it's seen as like invalid. You touched on some of the challenges. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about, maybe how it would have shaped this if you were in a faith community that did openly affirm who you are as a bisexual woman.
Well, I think one of the things that would happen in that case with an affirming community is in the congregation itself, whether you're straight or not straight, there is an understanding that there is diversity when it comes to sexual orientation and gender expression. So there's a general understanding of, oh, you can be a heterosexual, but you can also be part of the LGBTQ2+ community. And both choices are valid, and both choices one is not better than the other. So that common understanding is really helpful, because when there's no affirmative statement, what happens is you have individuals within community spaces who are inclusive, who do support the LGBTQ community, but there are those who aren't, and there are those who aren't even aware that the community actually needs to talk about this. So there's that disparity in knowledge, and when you have that disparity in knowledge, then it's like it becomes the elephant in the room. You also have belief systems with parents and caregivers who, like if I look at my family, like my immediate family, when I came out to my dad said, you know what, like I grew up in Tanzania. Homosexuality is still a criminal offense in Tanzania. Like you can still, till today, you can be handed the death penalty for that, right? So he's like, we didn't learn about this in school. And when I came to Canada 40 years ago, wasn't something that I paid attention to. So I don't know anything about it. So part of my journey of coming out, because I've been able to use my voice and I've been able to get help from others, I've been able to sort of help my parents along to say, okay, this is what it means to be LGBTQ. Here are some of the experiences. Here's where I'm having the disconnect. But that's a very privileged point of view. Not everyone comes from a family where their parents are loving you regardless of who you identify as. So then you get into this belief system where some parents are like, yeah, we love you for who you are. And you have other parents who are like, oh, my child identifies as part of the LGBTQ community, and I feel like I failed as a parent. And now on top of that, my child doesn't even want to go to the religious center that they grew up in, and it has afforded them so many things. And now I feel like as a parent, I failed on two fronts, when in reality, it's not about failure. It's not about the parent. It's about the actual individual finally accepting a part of who they are that was hidden. And for some, that comes out when they're 5. For others, it's 25. For others, it's 55. And for others, it's 95. So you get into that disparity, which doesn't help either people, because if you don't have visibility and you don't have understanding, then it's really hard to gain that momentum to even bring the case forward to say this actually matters. Because then you get into things of like, where's the evidence? Like, I don't see this as a problem. It doesn't affect me. So maybe it's only 2 people in the community, rather than coming to the point of view of everyone matters in the community, and there's diversity in the community, and we need to embrace everyone in the community, those who fit in the community and those on the other side of the spectrum that feel disconnected. There is an obligation to sort of cater to people across the spectrum, so everyone feels like oh yeah, I feel like I belong here. I feel like I'm welcome here. I feel like if I want to come here, there is a space for me, rather than being on eggshells and saying, oh, well, now I go to the prayer center and I feel anger and I feel disconnected. And I'm thinking, that's not what going to a prayer center is for. It's supposed to be like peace and fulfillment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate too that when, like, I'm just remembering a conversation that I had with somebody else, and their experience of coming out to their faith community was, oh, like, oh, still come, even if sacred spaces aren't openly hostile. In some ways, that the kind of implicit meanings behind
Oh, for sure.
are just as sharp as the daggers to the
Yeah. And if for anyone who's come out as, like, anyone who's embraced who they are and has, coming out is very much an inner process. It's basically, if I had to sum it up, it's creating a better relationship with yourself. That's what you're doing throughout the coming out process. So when we go into spaces, if you're an LGBTQ plus person and you have come out, by default, your superpower is knowing where you belong and where you don't. And when we hear implicit things that are said, or we sense it, we know right away. We'll know it based on the vibe of the place. We'll know it based on how people are looking at us. We pick up on things like that. We look at, do people's words and organizations' words actually match their actions? And if they don't, like, how bad is the discrepancy between the two? So there's a real ability to, like, sense, we know right away whether we belong or whether we don't belong. And I think that's not to toot our own horns, but it's one of the benefits of, like, going through that work of figuring out who you are.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly don't think it's a tooting your own horn. I mean, I think it's great that people develop that sense, but I also think it's, on the other hand, unfortunate that you have to develop that sense as, like, a seeking behavior, to develop that super sensitive radar of, safe here, is my family safe here, me and my partner, or not? Like, the other side of that is, it's unfortunate you need that radar to begin with.
For sure. And that leads into privilege too, right? I think when people talk about privilege today in society, we talk about it in the context of how have, I guess, Caucasians, what sort of benefits and privileges do they have at a society level compared to communities of color, and what does that look like? And there's conversations that are starting about that are very uncomfortable, right, for both parties to sort of engage in those discussions and then to move through it and to come to actually solutions where it's a win-win situation. And I would say, if I look at, it doesn't just happen at a society level, it's happening at a family level, it's happening at a religious level, it's happening at a work level. So if I look at the Ismaili Muslim community, which I grew up in 34 years, I would say, yeah, there is privilege in that community, because the majority of the people are identifying as heterosexual. And that aligns with the belief of the religion that says everyone has a soul. And there are various ways, there's rites and rituals where you can nourish your soul, and that soul takes human form in the form of a man and a woman. And so if you're part of that heterosexual majority, you know with a shadow of a doubt that you belong. You know you are loved by the leader. There's explicit statements that you can reference. There's scripture that you can use to back that up. You feel supported. You feel like your needs are met. You feel like, I belong. But if you're part of the minority within a minority, then you don't have those privileges. You don't know. I didn't know that I was 100% loved by the religious leader. I had to look through scriptures on diversity and pluralism and read between the lines to see if I fit in, whereas people who are heterosexuals knew with a shadow of a doubt that they belonged. My needs and my just being acknowledged was not a thing. It was like, why are you making this an issue? Why are you asking for too much? Why do you have to speak about it? Right? So privilege also, people don't realize, but privilege also happens, and it's good to look at it at the different levels, right? At a society level, and then go on to a community level, and then drill it down to the family and see what dynamics are playing out, and how can we acknowledge them and name them, and how can we then move forward so that there's more equity and inclusion across the board.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much there. So I'm wondering if I can ask this question, and I mean, if it's too heavy of a question, or if it's like a whole other interview later or whatever, like, please feel free to tell me. But so I'll speak for myself here as a white, heterosexual, cis, educated woman born in Canada, with all of the perks that come with being born Canadian. And so as someone who is very aware of that, but also wishes that this were not the case, like how do I, me personally, advocate, and how do I be present, and how do I be an ally when there are still things that I'm sure that I don't even see, even as much as I try to be aware of how I can walk down the street holding my partner's hand and it's no big deal, and so many other things that I probably don't even think about that are also a part of my privilege. So how do I begin to educate myself further on that?
Well, I think this interview, for example, is like one big part of that, right? In terms of a leadership, like you are in a leadership position at the church, and to say, oh, we're going to do this interview and we're going to bring someone in and we're going to talk about it. And we're also going to have the Affirming, like the service that happens for Pride. And we're going to make sure that diversity and inclusion is not just a 1-year event kind of thing, but we're going to incorporate it throughout the church and wherever it makes sense. Like that in itself is a huge thing, because not all organizations are doing that, whether they're religious organizations or religious communities or other ethnic communities. Not everyone's doing that. So that in itself is a huge thing. And I think it's about learning. There's a big learning component, because things are changing so quickly, right? In terms of society is becoming more open. Like religious communities some religious communities are realizing that, we need to change course and we need to do things differently. I think having people in your circle who identify as LGBTQ, whether they're acquaintances or friends, like that's a big place where you can learn about the nuances when you know someone personally and you get to know their struggles, and you sort of learn from each other to say, oh, how does this work in your world, and how does that work in your world? And the key thing for that is building authentic relationships, right? Where they're mutually beneficial. Like that's really important, and it's a good way to learn about the realities, because even when you look at LGBTQ people of color, I would say there's such a diversity in there, right? You can't paint everyone with the same brush, because you can have some communities of color who are actually very affirming and very accepting at an ethnic community level. And you have others that are at a kindergarten stage, and you have people who are somewhere in the middle. So even just acknowledging that if you look at the people of color community in Canada in general, there's diversity. If you look at it through the lens of sexual orientation and gender identity, there's definitely there's no cookie cutter approach. And then also approaching it to say, you can't have a one fit solution, or you can't say that, oh, because I know this community, it must be the same in the other community. So just being aware of that there's great disparities. Like some communities are doing really well. Some ethnic communities in Canada are not doing well when it comes to the LGBTQ community, because there's stigma, there's judgment, there's shame, their ethnic community is tied with their religious community, and their religious, both ethnic community and religious communities haven't moved forward. So having that understanding and that curiosity to say, oh, like, what is that about? Like, how did that come about? And approaching it from that perspective will open up more knowledge, and with more knowledge, when you know better, you can do better, right?
Right. Okay, so then what I'm hearing in your very eloquent answer to my inarticulate question, and awkward and uncomfortable, because these conversations can get kind of and uncomfortable, and we need to name that and
Yeah.
best anyway. So what I'm hearing is, for those of us who recognize that we have certain amounts of privilege in society, who desperately want to be allies and advocates and to help others, is to form relationships with people who have different life experiences from us, to educate ourselves, to recognize that between different groups there's lots of diversity within them and between them, and just education and relationship forming.
And I think the only other thing I would add is, if you're in a position of power and influence, and that you can have power and influence at a like a family level, at a friend level, at an organization level, at a religious community level, at a society level. If you have power and influence and you're volunteering on community on any sort of initiative, then bring that diversity and inclusion lens at the beginning. Don't make it an afterthought. And look at your initiative from start to finish to say, hey, we're working on initiative X, and you're doing your pre-planning phase, and bring in that gender bias perspective, bring in that diversity inclusion perspective at the planning to say, are we reaching everyone? And then also bring it through to the implementation phase. Maybe you need to change things slightly so that more people are included. Maybe you need to have your initiative needs to be offered in 5 different ways so that it caters to more people and they can participate, and then to report on it and also bring that perspective forward too. So part of it is, if you have power and influence, use it in your initiatives. Also use it as a place to say, who has a seat at the table, right? So if you're in a room and you're on an initiative relating to like Pride, for example, and you're planning Pride in your community, well, then in that perspective, it's helpful to have LGBTQ people who are part of organizations. It's good to have prominent community organizers. It's good to have government people that are there. It's good to have influencers. It's good to have allies of the communities at the table. It's good to have people who are dealing with current issues who in the community. So whether it's other community partners who need to be at the table, it's bringing in those people at the table so that they have a say, and not just saying, we're going to plan our initiative, but we're just going to bring in only people that fit this box, and we're just going to ignore the other 10. And then at the end, we're just going to apologize and say, hey, sorry, we forgot about you, or we weren't really thinking about your needs and the fact that there's a whole group of people here that fit 10 different categories. So it's also who's at the table, who gets a voice, who gets to talk about the issues that matter. That is the other piece that is often an afterthought. Right.
And I bet like even that piece for certain groups would take quite a bit of imagination, even look outside the box of what we typically see to recognize if there's somebody who's not at the table.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, we have like X, Y, and Z here, and we're all representing various issues of, you know, whatever, but is the building wheelchair accessible?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We couldn't get in here. Like I can appreciate like the more we come to understand like, you know, diversity even within groups, we recognize intersectionality, and we recognize that people belong to different groups and different communities, and so also broadening our own worldviews to recognize that like we're in boxes we didn't realize we were in.
And intersectionality, like I feel like if you look at the LGBTQ community, just celebrated 50 years in 2019. And if I look at the next 50 years for the LGBTQ community, it's all going to be about intersections. It's going to be about people who have multiple identities, and how do those multiple identities either coexist, or how are they clashing and causing further damage to people and communities and families. And no one's really, we're sort of just on that cusp of talking about it, but we really haven't gone into deep resources and how do you process that from, if you're a heterosexual perspective, because you also have multiple identities, but how does that differ than someone who is like me versus someone who is like you that has multiple identities? We both face challenges. We both face troubles. We both face difficulties, but how are they different and how are they the same? Because in the end, we're all part of one community.
Right.
And we need to be more connected. So I feel like that's where the conversation is going to be going in the next 50 years, because we have, in Canada, we have same-sex marriage. It's been around. There's further rights that have been gained in the last 20 years. So that's like the next chapter of where we go, and how do we do this at a family level, at a society level, at a religious community level? What does that look like?
Oh, that's really powerful. Oh, I'm so happy for doing this interview. So then, like in that vein though, just to take a step back, so what do you think that it means, or more specifically, what does it mean for you to know that there are sacred spaces, there are faith communities that are becoming inclusive and affirming of the LGBTQ2+ community, but also seeking to even further their sense of how inclusive they are, and recognizing those intersectional needs of people in the community?
To me, it's monumental. I feel like it warms my heart to know that people now, if you're part of certain religious groups, like your journey just became a whole lot easier. And to know that the struggles that I faced, other people, and from now and going forward, don't have to face those same inner battles and struggles of fighting for who they are to be in a space that's inclusive. I know for me personally, I've been to the United Church. I've been to the Reformed Temple, which is like, it's a denomination of the Jewish faith. And I can tell you, like, I'm not an active person who follows those faiths, but to walk into that space and to know that I'm welcomed and to know that it's safe, that feeling doesn't get old. I could do that a million times, and every time I go, it's like, oh, there's a sense of peace. There's a sense of, oh, I can just relax and be myself and feel like, yeah, I may not know the religious scriptures. I may not be able to follow the ceremony, but that doesn't matter, because I know there's a space for me at the table. I know that I belong. And that feeling is really, it's really critical. And if we could multiply that feeling to say that, okay, in society, we're going to make sure all spaces like that, then that would make life so much easier for people who identify as LGBTQ+, because in our world, that is a treat. That is not our norm, to be in a space where we are included and we feel safe and we can participate and we can learn. And that's not the case in our world. Our world is very much the opposite of sussing it out. And is it safe, and how much can I say, and who's going to judge me? Do I need to make a safety plan before I go in to say, right, if it's awkward, how am I going to get out? And do I need to make sure that I drive there, or make sure that it's beside transit so that I'm not reliant on someone to drive me home? Like, there's all these considerations. So the affirming spaces definitely, like, never get old. A very powerful way to transform someone from the inside out.
Okay, and so one more time for the people in the back, it does not get old.
It does not get old. Like, it's, okay. And it's that feeling that like warms my heart. I remember the first time that like I went into an affirming space, I was in tears. And it was that tears of, oh, this is what I've been searching for 34 years. I no longer have to go into a religious, when I look back at between the ages of 24 and 34, the closer I got to 34 years of age, the more disconnect there was. And I would go to the prayer center, and instead of feeling peace and fulfillment, I would feel rage and anger.
Right.
At the core of the religion, to be like, why am I here when I don't even know that I belong? Why do I not have scripture that actually supports me? And then you go into an affirming space, and it's like, oh my God, I can breathe. This is what I've been searching for like 34 years, 35 years. And oh, I wish I would have had this 10 years ago when I was 24 years old, because life would have been a lot easier. The amount of struggles and the amount of trauma would have been reduced in my case, because I grew up in a religion. It was a core part of my being for 34 years. So to disconnect from that is very hard. So to have that affirming space, it would have meant the world to me.
Wow. And I mean, it's just, I'm so happy that you're sharing this with us and that we're having this conversation, because I think within, particularly in the United Church of Canada, because, this has been, since 1988, the decision that, the full inclusion and
Yeah.
orientation of the LGBTQ community. I mean, at that time, it might have just been gay or lesbian. I'm actually not really sure. And it was a time where there was some division in the church, and some people, many of them eventually came back, but not all. But because it has been since 1988, I think that there is a sense for some members of the United Church of Canada of like, yeah, okay, we get it. Like, we're affirming. We can just stop talking about it now. It's like, it's a given. But like, that's not necessarily the case.
No, it's very much a privilege. And I would say, if you took all of the religions and you like made a spreadsheet and you put them all on the list, and for argument's sake, we're going to say there's 100 on that list, I would say there's not very many that are affirming.
Right.
It's a very point of privilege to have a religious community that has said, not only are we affirming, but we're also going to do marriages, and we're going to also interpret scriptures and the Bible in a way that's holistic and progressive, and take the entirety rather than just taking verses out and stories out and not putting them in context. Like, that in itself is very much progressive, and that is definitely not the norm.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. I know I have my little list of questions here, and I feel like we've already covered most of what we had, but I will take a moment just to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
I would say, because of your experience of being affirming, I would say share your story and share it broadly in terms of how you did it, what it's meant, how you transformed the myths of there's myths in, at least in the communities that I've belonged to, that if you start including the LGBTQ plus people within a community, that means those that are in the majority will actually lose something rather than seeing it as gaining it. So share your story, share your results, and share it broadly. And whether that be TEDx talks, whether that be conferences that are religious based, like interfaith conferences, whether that be speaking at LGBTQ plus conferences, share it widely so people know, because you have a success story and you have something that you've been doing for so long that needs to be shared. And the other thing I would say is there are a few other religious groups that are affirming. So there is also an opportunity to say, where can you partner with other religious communities to make a statement of, this is a need, this is how we've done it, this is what it's resulted, here's what we're doing with diversity and inclusion, because your congregation and what you're doing is really phenomenal, and more people need to hear about it and to see it so that they can understand it and say, oh, if they can do it in their context, then I can replicate it in my context. And it's not that scary, and we can actually work together, because often we work in silos and we think, well, if this community group or this religious group is not affirming, then they're all not like that, and I can't really go ask someone else how they've done it. But this is an opportunity to say, like, each religious organization needs to acknowledge their own people. That's a given. No one can change that. But where there is opportunities is in the how-to and the learning, and to collaborate on not just how you do it, but other initiatives around social justice, around diversity and inclusion. And whether it's at a community level or provincial level, that's also very powerful to affect change.
Awesome. Oh, so wonderful. Hasina, it has been an absolute privilege having this chance to chat with you tonight and pick your brain and to have you share your wisdom with us. Thank you so, so much for making yourself available and open to this conversation. If people want to find you, reach out to contact you, how would they go about doing that?
So you can go to my website. It's hasinajuma.com. Or if you're on Facebook or on Instagram, you can just search Hasina Juma 99 and my respective pages will show up. And awesome. Congratulations too on the anniversary. It's a really big deal, given the fact that we're at a time where we're more disconnected than connected, and everyone's just looking at differences. We're more similar than we are different. So this milestone is definitely something to celebrate, even while everyone's at home.
Thank you so much. And we'll also have your contact info that you just said on our Facebook page as well.
Perfect.
And in the description for this video. So thank you again. It was
no problem. Okay, take care.
Take care. Let's join our hearts and our minds in prayer. We sing to you, God of grace and love. We sing to you, God of creation, sovereign over all the earth. You surprise us in your resurrection power, at work in Jesus' life and death, bringing new beginnings, showing up in unexpected places. You surprise us in your resurrection power, at work in our lives and in our deaths, the places where we have given up and do not expect you to act in any way that matters. You surprise us in your resurrection power, calling us by name, giving us one another, siblings we did not know we had. Your new community of grace and truth and hope and love. Now, in our praise, In our prayers, in our waiting, enter our lives again. Enter our lives with power for newness, with courage to love one another, with hope and peace and joy, that we may be your new creation. God, you are holy mystery and wholly mysterious to us. We have so many questions that we can't answer, and our unanswered questions lead us to doubt. Help us to live with our questions. Help us to know you as a loving and life-giving presence in our lives. Help us to know you as our rock and our hope. Teach us your many names, you who are holy mystery and wholly mysterious to us, as we offer you the prayers that sit on our hearts this day. Holy One, with grieving but grateful hearts, we give you thanks for the life of Henry Unrell. We praise you for all that he was to his family, his community, his faith community, and the world. We entrust Henry into your gracious, infinite hands, and we pray that you wrap your arms of comfort, warmth, and peace around Lois, Keith, and David during this difficult time. Holy One, we also pray for Gloria on the loss of her husband in Victoria, BC. May she experience your peace and your comfort. Holy One, as we as a country struggle to come to terms with the violent, horrific, and senseless acts committed in Nova Scotia, may those most affected by this horrible tragedy feel your presence among them. We pray for all of the people of Nova Scotia, those there and those scattered all around. May those experiencing hurt and grief and hate and anger and deep, deep, deep sadness experience your peace. And Holy One, as we continue to experience this pandemic globally, we pray for the doctors, the nurses, the researchers seeking answers, and all of those who are caring for the sick. And finally, Holy One, we offer our prayers for the entire LGBTQ2+ community. May we, as an affirming congregation, continue still to find new ways of being advocates and allies. We pray for a world where we no longer need to be, when there will be no discrimination or hate crimes, when everybody is free to love whoever they love peacefully. Bless us as we strive to do even better. Holy One, we bind together these and all our prayers as we say together those ancient words that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
And now a reading from 1 Peter, chapter 2, verse 17, from the Message. Treat everyone you meet with dignity. Love your spiritual family. Revere God. Amen.